to all of you for coming. Great to see so many people here. My name's Catriona. I found out about Giving What We Can about 18 months ago when a friend sent me an article on the BBC website about the organisation. As most of you probably know, it's an organisation that encourages people to give more to charity, but even more importantly to encourage them to give to the right charities, the ones that can use money in the most cost-effective way. Members make a pledge to give 10% of their salaries to the most cost-effective charities. And just over a year ago I made that pledge. At the moment I'm giving to SCI, which...
Don't stop!
Well, keep on being cost-effective, which Professor Adam Fenwick... And we're going to be hearing from him first about some of the work they do. I guess I made the pledge not so much because it was something I wanted to do, but something I really felt I ought to do. And, you know, I was a bit reluctant about the idea of giving up some of the luxuries. But actually, to my surprise, I found that once I did start giving 10%, it made me happier as well. And that's the kind of subject that I think Mark is going to be covering. He's from a wonderful organisation called Action for Happiness, which is kind of what it says on the tin. At least my interpretation is it's sort of about putting happiness a bit more on the national agenda and getting politicians and everyone else to take it seriously as something that's of central importance. Shortly after I made the pledge, I decided to start a local chapter here in London. I think I'm right in saying we're the 6th local chapter, but we're also a bit of a first because all the others are attached to a specific university, whereas we're citywide. You know, we welcome students, but we also welcome anyone else. Me, Sam and Jessie are the committee for London, and any of us would be happy to chat to you about Giving What We Can and what we do. You should all have a questionnaire in front of you, which would be incredibly grateful if you could fill in and put in the box on the chair at the back, just there, to let us know what you think about the event, and also if you'd be interested in knowing more, either a one-to-one chat with one of us or getting on the mailing list or whatever. There's going to be a chance to ask questions to any of our 3 speakers at the end, and then I hope as many of you as possible will stay for a glass of wine or juice and some nibbles, and then there'll be a chance to ask questions more informally, either to us or to the speakers. So thank you very much for coming, all of you, and without further ado I'll hand over to Alan.
Now, you gave me a machine here so I can stand on one side. Good. Thank you very much, everybody. It's nice to be here. As I say, Schistosomiasis Control Initiative, which is great. Nobody can pronounce it. And none of the medics at Imperial College know what it is. But it's basically a worm disease which we focus on. And we do not only research, but also surveillance, monitoring and evaluation, but our main job is actually getting treatments to people who need it. Now, SCI would not be where we are today, quite frankly, without Giving What We Can. Toby Ord and Will Crouch, who started it, came to see me in my office about 2.5 years ago, and they grilled me like I've never been grilled before. And I thought to myself, I actually thought that they were going to set up something like Just Giving, where they were going to take 10% of everything they raised for SCI. But it was fascinating to be grilled by them, and then off they went. And about a month later, they came back and they said that they were going to have a launch in Oxford. Would I be willing to come and tell them about SCI? So and I agreed, and off I drove to Oxford. And they actually gave me a cheque, and that was the first donation that we'd ever had to SCI, because prior to that we'd been funded by larger organisations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I was present at that launch, and I must say I've been a staunch supporter ever since, and have turned up at subsequent anniversaries. So where have we got to today? Well, as you can imagine, Giving What We Can started with a relatively few members, but slowly as time has gone by, and Toby, I must say, is quite charismatic, and he's managed to pick the right moment to announce what he was going to do, so that the BBC, TV and various other networks picked him up and showed him, and the response was brilliant, especially when he said such wonderful things as STI is 100 times more effective than your average charity. I'm not going to comment on that, but it certainly is not something that I dare say, but it's so nice to have somebody independent who has done a lot of research on us to say it. So we have 120 people who are members of Giving What We Can, just to put things in perspective, who donate anything from £5 to £100 a month to our charity, and it goes into a sort of fund which we call a treatment fund. And we have other donors who have made one-off donations, maybe towards the end of the tax year or at Christmas. Sometimes people have gone out and done things. Some people have decided to not have any birthday presents, but to donate to us. Anyway, over the last couple of years, the amount of money that's been raised has allowed us to actually deliver over 5 million treatments of deworming pills and schistosomiasis pills to children who we would not otherwise have been able to reach. That 5 million sounds like an awful lot from 120 people, and it's actually skewed a little bit by one gentleman who walked into my office and slapped £400,000 on the table. And with his money, we've actually been able to commit to deworming every school child in Burundi for the next 4 years. And so, as I say, the figures are a little bit skewed. But nevertheless, with the money that Giving What We Can and the members have given us, we've been able to start up some new programs. So let me just quickly, and there's only 6 or 7 slides, show you a little bit more. I'm not quite sure how many of you have heard me talk before or know what schistosomiasis is, but it's actually a pretty horrible worm, a male and female worm on the left, and the worms live in the blood vessels. And the life cycle, in order to continue, the female worm lays eggs which have got to get out of the human body. And the only way they can do that is to break a capillary tube and get either into the bladder or into the intestine. And obviously, as they burst the capillary tube, not only do the eggs go into the urine and stool, but also a drop of blood does too. So there in the middle is a picture of urine, which in some children in sub-Saharan Africa, which have never been treated, you would find 80% of the children in primary school would have urine like that. And the gentleman on the right has got severe hepatosplenomegaly because, unfortunately, not all the eggs manage to leave the human body. And those that don't get flushed in the bloodstream to the liver, where they block the liver, they've nowhere to go from the liver, they die, and eventually, as these worms lay hundreds of eggs every day, the liver slowly becomes fibrotic, with the net result that you get hepatosplenomegaly, which can lead to death. Now, the other thing that we treat, because almost everybody who's got schistosomiasis has also got one or other of the intestinal helminths, and there are 3 of those, and as you can see there, they infect an awful lot of people, so that basically 1 in 6 of the human population has got one or other of these worms. And yet you don't find them in Europe, you don't find them in America. The hookworm used to be a huge problem in the United States, but it's all been got rid of by improved water and sanitation. Sadly, in the developing world, water and sanitation is a luxury, and therefore there are a lot of these worms. And if we treated that little girl with a drug that costs 1 penny, that girl would actually emit these worms. And we have to basically treat people in areas where there's poor water and sanitation every 6 months. And that's what we're doing in Burundi with the money that's been donated from the Giving What You Can donor. So as I said, how many people are infected? Well, basically, worldwide, we reckon that 1 in 6 of the human population have at least one, if not more than one, of these worm diseases, which are called neglected tropical diseases. Rather sadly, that women are particularly badly affected by schistosomiasis because both schistosomiasis and intestinal worms, as you can imagine from what I've told you about the life cycle, cause anemia. And one of the worst reasons for poor birth outcomes is anemia. And therefore it's really important that we treat women of childbearing age, and preferably treat them while they're at school before they develop their anemia. Because if they are anemic, then we get weak and underweight children, infant deaths, and in fact illness and deaths in the mothers themselves. The other thing about schistosomiasis is that the eggs don't always behave themselves and go out in the bladder. They can actually, in women, involve the genital system. And then if you get lesions on the cervix, it's been shown that one of the reasons why there's such high HIV in sub-Saharan Africa, in places like Tanzania, Mozambique and Zimbabwe, is because there's so much urinary schistosomiasis. The girls leave school, they've got lesions on their cervix, which means that the door is open when they do have sexual contact for HIV to infect them. These worms can be treated just so easily. We have one drug against schistosomiasis called praziquantel. It costs less than 20 pence per child, and we only have to treat once a year. For albendazole, which is the drug that deworms children from intestinal helminths, one treatment costs 1 penny, and we only have to give it once a year, or in very heavily infected areas twice a year. Both drugs are safe, both drugs are effective. Sadly, the one thing about the drugs is that they don't give any immunity to future infection, and so we do have to retreat in areas which are highly endemic. And we can deliver the treatments for less than 50 pence per child per year. It's actually probably about half that. And it's actually getting even cheaper because a couple of the pharmaceutical companies are now donating the drug to us. So in the next 5 years, we are very hopeful that we'll get up to 100 million treatments donated by Merck Serono. And GSK have promised to donate us 400 million tablets a year to deworm school-aged children in Africa. So all we need is the money for the logistics, the training, etc., which I think is in the next slide. So what we have to do is we have to mobilize political will, because of course the politicians have no idea what schistosomiasis is or what intestinal helminths is. They know what HIV is because they can get that, and they know what malaria is because they can get bitten by a mosquito. But these diseases are the poorest of the poor. So then we have to define the disease distribution in each of the countries that we work in. We have to do mapping and collect baseline data, because we don't want to waste our drug by treating in areas where there isn't any. And then with the local people we develop a national plan, and we do a strategic work out our strategies at each district level, because these diseases are very focal. We then define the drug needs, because you've really got to order these drugs about 6 months in advance to make sure that they're where you need them when you want them. And then we develop local advocacy tools, because it's really important that you don't just line kids up, tell them to open their mouth and give them a pill. You've got to explain to them why they're being treated. And you've actually got to explain to the teachers, which is even more important, the importance and the value of the treatments. We then train the teachers and deliver them the drugs. And then afterwards, it's very important that we do monitoring and evaluation so that we can watch how children grow as a result of being dewormed. And I have to tell you that that growth spurt, as long as the treatment's caught early enough, is quite dramatic.